It occurred to me that while I've talked to lots of producers for this podcast, it might be time to talk to a director. Eric Rutledge has been directing live studio shows, mostly golf, for over 25 years. We worked together at Golf Channel for the entirety of my time there. I wanted him to come on to explain what a director does, and we go deep into all the different jobs in the control room and in the truck. He describes his career path, which now includes teaching, and I could use some education. So class is in session. Welcome to Sportscasting 101 on Media Credentials.
I demand satisfaction.
My name is Whit Watson, and this is Media Credentials. I'm a sports announcer who's worked a lot of places. This podcast will peel back the layers of sports media and show you how the sausage gets made. Through interviews with industry pros and my own experience, you'll understand why you're seeing what you're seeing and who's responsible for it. Your media credentials have been approved. Directing a live studio show or sporting event requires a lot of practice. It's equal parts team captain and moderator. Eric Rutledge got his start as a director in college, eventually making his way to Golf Channel, where he spent nearly 20 years primarily doing studio work. He currently directs live golf for PGA TOUR Live, the tour's streaming service, but his day job finds him in the role of educator. Eric teaches a class at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting at Full Sail University. It's a specialized school for entertainment media and emerging technologies located here in Orlando. And it's not just any old class that Eric teaches, it's the first one, Introduction to Sportscasting. All of the students in the Full Sail Sports Broadcasting program have to go through Eric first. Those students are lucky to have him. Eric, thanks a lot for coming on. I want to get to your current position at Full Sail University here in the Orlando area in a little bit, but first, let's go back to the very beginning of your broadcast career. How did you get started?
Whit, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Always happy to talk to you for sure. How I got started, I was always somebody that enjoyed sports growing up. I grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan. My parents are still up there, but I was always someone that enjoyed sports, always watched it, always wanted to be on air when I was younger. Just kind of caught that bug early in my life and wanted to study that in college. Went away to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Shout out to the Broncos, and just really wanted to learn everything I could. And quickly I realized that I was not someone that needed to be on air because I wasn't as good probably or as outgoing as I probably should have been or as good as I thought I was on air. So I quickly went towards the behind the scenes, and I started learning about directing and things like that early on into my college career. And then I had a goal to what I wanted to do. So, but I didn't know anything about anything but being on television, watching local news and watching all my heroes were people doing sports locally, or Bob Costas and things like that, people that I was listening to on radio or on TV. So once I started realizing the behind the scenes, that's kind of where I gravitated. So that's kind of the short version of a long history of my love for sports and a love for television for sure.
You're about the fourth or fifth person that I've talked to who said, I wanted to be on the air first
Yeah.
and then figured out that you didn't think you were good enough. Was there an aha moment? Did you have a classmate or was there somebody else locally where you looked at that person and said, okay, I'm not that good, I can't do that? Or did it just come kind of gradually?
I think it came gradually. Like I said, I don't think I didn't know anything else about television except for what I saw. And pretty early on, I can tell you that I still don't like hearing my voice if I'm being recorded on something, or I don't.
Oh, now you tell me. Great.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry for bearing that lead, but I don't know. It maybe didn't have the confidence. I was a pretty confident person in sports and a lot of things growing up that I was playing, but maybe not the confidence of really putting myself out there on television. But I knew I had the confidence to go the directing route and to lead in that way. I always thought of myself as a quiet leader and maybe not as someone that needed, or not needed, but was going to be successful being on television. It was kind of an aha moment when I realized, oh, there's something else here that I think, be good at.
And this is definitely one job in the control room or in the truck that I'm not as familiar with, and that is directing. How did you learn how to do it? How does one learn how to direct?
That's a great question. I learned a little bit at Western, doing things, directing other students' assignments. I always wanted to fill that role. I wanted to learn how to do camera. I wanted to learn how to be a stage manager or a floor director. I wanted to really make sure I knew everything about directing. So when I got the chance to direct, I would understand the expectations of those other positions and things like that. So I think I just learned it by doing it. My last semester of college, I started at a local affiliate, WWMT. It's a CBS affiliate in Kalamazoo, Michigan, Market 36. And that's how I learned everything about directing. I was sitting in a control room 2 times a day, 5 times a week, 6 times a week, 6 days, and just learning and watching and understanding the cadence, the calls, watching other people that had done it. Again, I was doing audio. I was a technical director. I started out doing graphics. I would do playback or videotape playback when it was tapes back in the day.
Sure.
And that was in 1995. And since then, I think I've just learned it by doing it. And when I got, a chance at a network, I was not ready for that chance because I wasn't great then, and I hadn't done it a lot then, but I knew I could. I knew I was going to be okay when I was put in that position. And I would direct things honestly, without being on a headset professionally. I would be at home trying to direct Sports Center, or I would be at home trying to direct a Detroit Tigers baseball game that I was watching, trying to figure out how many cameras they had, what are different ways to direct. I would be doing it actively when I was sitting at home. So I was certainly interested in getting better.
That first network that you mentioned was Golf Channel, and you were an early entrant. You got there just 6 years after Golf Channel went on the air, and you just told me that you weren't ready for that job. How did you find out about Golf Channel, and how did you get the job?
So I started playing golf. I've been playing golf for maybe 15 years. About 1985, I was in middle school, and my dad took me out and played. And like television, I caught the golf bug pretty quickly as well, and I loved it. And in 2000, I started sending out resumes. I was up in Michigan. It was cold. In December 2000, I sent around about 20 resumes to warm weather climates, all of them, local news and networks as well. And Golf Channel was the one that I really wanted to hear from. And I got a call about a month later from that. It's kind of right place at right time. And I came down for my interview in January 2001, January 16th, 2001. I remember the day like it was yesterday. And that was the 6-year anniversary of Golf Channel. And then the next day I accepted a associate director position, knowing that I would be a director there and given that opportunity. And then in February 2001, I was down in Orlando, not knowing anyone, but down here working and meeting people and ready for my next chance for sure.
I'm going to ask you to pretend that we don't work in the same industry for a second and explain to me the difference between the director, the producer, the technical director, and the associate producer. How do the jobs differ?
That's a great question, and I do get that a lot. I could tell you that the producer would be more in charge of the content. The quick way to explain it between a producer and a director: producer is in charge of the content and how the show is going to flow, whether it's a scripted show that has a rundown for it, or it's a golf tournament or a baseball game or anything like that. Producer is going to be, where are we going next? What are we interested in covering in this game? What is the story that we're interested in covering? I would say that's what the producer is going to do. The director would be in charge of the technical aspects of the show, leading the crew, the cameras, audio, graphics, camera, the blocking, the different cameras that you're going to do, readying cameras, giving those cues for every different position on the technical side of. So if the producer has an idea of what they want the story to be, the director will tell the story visually. That's kind of a quick way to explain it. It's hard for me because I know how experienced and how good you are at what you do. So like I'm trying to explain it in a very basic way feels weird to me, but that's kind of that's how I would explain it to a student of mine now.
And that's exactly what I was. Yeah, I've got friends that don't work in the industry that are constantly coming back to me after the podcast and saying things like, "What's a rundown?" So,
Yeah.
that's why I asked the question. The technical director, the TD, as we call it, I know what that person does, but I'll have you explain it.
Yeah, so I started training how the technical direct probably in 1996, about 6 months after starting at the CBS affiliate up in Michigan. And a quick way to explain it, always either left or right of the director for a broadcast in television. And they work hand in hand about if I'm saying ready one, take one, ready two, take two, and making these camera calls, or set three, dissolve three, or something like that. The technical director is the person on the crew that is physically pushing the buttons to get those cameras on the air. So anything you see on program of any sports show or any entertainment show live is going to have a technical director next to the director, and they are in charge of getting it. They're the last line of defense of getting something on the air, basically. And they're sitting at the switcher, and they're setting up the transitions, the different playlists, and different things like that, timelines that are going to make the show successful by actually technically doing it. I would say that the TD, and I managed the technical directors at Golf Channel for the last few years I was there, and I would say that technically they're probably have the most ability of anyone on the crew, and they're kind of the technical lead of the crew, always making sure they would go the route of an engineer essentially if they didn't want to be a technical director, I think, because they really are technically sound. But directors should have a good relationship with their technical director for sure if they want to be successful. That's for sure.
I know that when I work with a director or a producer, either in studio or at a live event, maybe it's someone that I am not as familiar with, I will always tell them, you can't talk to me enough. You cannot be in my ear too much. I don't mind it. I'm used to it. And the communication is critical to make sure that we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing. Yes. I would imagine that's even more true between the people who are in the control room or the people who are in the truck at a live event, that communication has to be absolutely crystal clear.
Yeah, absolutely. The collaboration, I think, especially between the producer and director, when you're trying to move the show forward, if there's breaking news or if the show is going as scripted, there always needs to be that communication between the producer and director, and kind of that communication starts there. And then the director would have to speak to the technical crew right away about the expectations of the show, moving it forward. The rundown helps in that way, and it's fun because I can teach rundowns now to my students, and they can kind of understand how these shows are put together. But yeah, if the show wants to be successful, you have to be able to answer a lot of questions on headset. You have to prioritize what questions you're going to answer first. And I always say that you're talking to maybe 20 people, 25, 30 people on headset, whatever it is, depending on the bigness of the show. But directors are used to probably talking to themselves in their head all the time. So it's not a problem as long as you're not answering all your questions in your head. You have no problem talking to people and answering questions, because I feel like we are always talking to ourselves in our head. A successful director should always be communicating. That's a part of the job. You have to know how to communicate. You have to know how to put people in the position to succeed. And also you have to manage a lot of those personalities that you have on your crew.
Right.
I think there's so many people that have different personalities, and I've chosen in my career to be able to lead with calmness, because I believe calmness builds confidence in people. And I've been on the other end early in my career when I was being called out on headset really early, like first or second week of doing this, that I was messing something up graphically, and a director jumped on me and he started yelling at me. And I learned quickly that that is not the way I was going to do it. I would be respectful. I would make sure when on headset, I could calmly lead the team through. And I'm happy to say that I continue to do it that way, because it's important to me not to do it the other way. So a calm communication, you have to have that as you go through. If you're going to blow up at everything, then I don't believe you can succeed.
If you were a screamer, you wouldn't be on this podcast. I'll tell you that right now, because I've worked with those people too. And at ESPN, at least on the studio side, I didn't do many, if at all, live events for ESPN when I was working there. This is a million years ago. But on the studio side, there was kind of a no screaming policy. Like they you weren't allowed to raise your voice if you were on headsets, because for exactly what you're talking about, for somebody getting embarrassed or someone getting called out.
Yeah.
Let's go to Golf Channel, as you did after Kalamazoo. That's a long stretch that you had there. What were some of the great memories, the big events from your time at Golf Channel?
Oh gosh, there's so many, and I'm so fortunate to have been there. And I think I was really lucky to be there when I was, because we were growing a network, and we were all pretty young, and that was what was so much fun. We were growing professionally and personally together, and I was able to build a lot of relationships with a lot of really talented people who I can still call my friends to this day. And that's the biggest thing about being there where I was. What made it special is the people that I got to work with, you included. It was just a lot of fun to be around a lot of really talented people for a long time. I was lucky enough to be the first director or the lead director on the startup of some shows there at Golf Channel, live from that started in March of 2005. I was the first director for that. I was the first director for Sprint pregame and Sprint postgame in 2003, working with Eric Saperstein as the producer, and just a really great crew of friends on that show. And that was one of the first shows that we traveled completely on Golf Channel, meeting graphics, music. The set was at the tournament, and we would mainly focus on pre and post game. It wasn't tournament stuff at the time, but we were focusing on the pre and post. So that was a lot of fun, and that was something that really helped me grow, because I had never really directed in a truck before. And that's when I first started understanding the importance of leading a team remotely and how it deals with the studio side, which I was a lot more familiar with directing at the time. So the majors, that got me to start going to the majors. So I would say from about 2003 to 2010, I would go to most of the majors. We wouldn't always do the Open Championship because the time delay, and we do a lot of it back home in Orlando. But I was now starting to travel and now starting to make contacts outside of Orlando and leading teams that way. So instructional shows I would do on the road, and I do in studio as well. Golf Fix in 2009, I was the first director on that show with Michael Breed, learning how to really build a show and from the ground floor on those three shows that I talked about. And then in late 2010, I was given the opportunity to be the first director on Morning Drive, which was the first morning show on Golf Channel in the studio. And we didn't travel the show for a couple of years, but I was able to really early in the morning start building a show for the morning, which was a completely different audience than anything I had ever kind of worked with before. working with David Gross and Jeremy Davis, who I'm so lucky to work with now with PGA Tour Live on that show, and just a lot of talented people. I would say really being part of a lot of great teams. And I don't think I was a good director until I understood the importance of how to work with a team. I was very selfish, I think, at first at Golf Channel, wanting to get on in all the big chairs, wanted to do everything. And I felt like I was doing a lot of stuff on my own, when in turn, it was so different than that. I wasn't successful as a director until I understood the importance of making a team better and understanding the importance of teamwork. And that came to me while I was traveling and building these shows and doing that and traveling with these great people and creating memories with them. So going to some great tournaments. The good thing about Golf Wit, as you know, is that as golf goes to the best places in the world at the best time of the year.
Yes, they do.
With the best climate and some great courses. So I was so blessed to go to these places with my friends and do a lot of really fun stuff. So that's the best way to put it for me.
I always tell people they don't play golf in ugly places. That's the best part of the job.
Completely fair and accurate, yeah.
For those, again, who are outside baseball, you've got a studio show, a scripted studio show like a Golf Central that has a rundown, which if people listen to the very first episode of this podcast, I explain what that is. It's a list of stories and topics in the order in which they will be presented. That's a studio show. Then you've got these live pregame, postgame, like live from at the majors, which are scripted until they're not. They're scripted for about the first 10 minutes, and then it goes off the script usually. Yep. And then you've got a live event, just a game or a tournament. As the director, what are some of the differences in those three situations?
I think it kind of all starts with the rundown, honestly, for any kind of scripted show, like a Golf Central studio show. That would be very scripted. That would your leads and tags and bumps and your throws to remotes and different things like that would be very scripted. And the way I would teach a rundown to students, which I'm lucky to do now, it's just really, like you said, a list of things that you're working on, that you know what is next. And I think as a director of a scripted show like a Central or a pregame, postgame, either in studio or at remote, you always have to be, I would say, about 3 or 4 stories ahead. So you're not handcuffing yourself with your camera blocking, with your sources, your playback, some different things that you're going to have in the stories coming up in the near future. But I also think as a director, you need to be about 2 or 3 blocks or segments ahead as well. So you're always having a plan and a backup plan for those plans in case something goes down technically or breaking news happens. Some of the most fun shows I've done are during breaking news, and you can take the rundown and you could just crumble it up and throw it away. And now you're just directing, you're going on instinct, and you're working with the producer in getting out the best thing possible. So scripted shows, much different than a tournament, because a tournament, you're going to probably have more cameras and you're covering the golf course. You don't have one game you're doing like in a basketball game or a baseball game or a football game. You have 18 different games that you're directing now because you have 18 different holes and there's always a ball in the air. So it's really much more reactionary, not as scripted. You would have some sales things scripted, but that you have to get in. But you're really reacting to the story that's happening, whether it's inside the ropes or outside the ropes as well. You're always trying to tell that story. So it's just a different kind of directing, much more reactionary on the tournament side, as it would be scripted, other pregame, postgame, instructional, different things like that in studio or out of studio.
When Golf Channel left Orlando and moved to Stamford, Connecticut, to the existing NBC Sports Group headquarters, that story was well documented and very surprising at the time. I don't think a whole lot of us really saw that coming. Were you concerned about what was going to happen next?
Oh, yeah. I was very concerned about it. I've been there for about 19 years when that was broke in January 2020. So yeah, I was certainly concerned. I had three young kids, like a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and I think a 5-year-old at the time. So yeah, and I loved doing what I was doing. So I didn't know what the future was going to be, or really, I think there's just a lot of questions about when that came out. When are we moving to Connecticut? It was said that it was going to be in 2020. And then about 2 months after, a month and a half after that came out, the pandemic hit. So then it kind of shut the world down in so many ways. And so that just added so many other concerns in your life at that time. But I think the biggest question I had was, where am I going to go? I know I didn't want to go to Connecticut at the time, but what is the next thing that I'm going to do? And how am I going to continue doing what I'm doing? Because I love it. And I had been doing it for close to 20 years there, but also 26 years professionally after college. So I knew I wanted to stay doing it. I just didn't, I certainly had some concerns, both family concerns and now we're trying to get through a pandemic. So does that push Golf Channel moving back? I don't know. There was just so many questions up in the air. And it wasn't that long ago either.
No, it feels like it was forever ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. So this second chapter, then, there's two things going on. One, or maybe more than two, you tell me, working with the PGA Tour on their streaming broadcast, where you and I see each other at PGA Tour Entertainment Headquarters in St. Augustine once in a while.
Yes.
That's one of your new chapters. And another one is working at Full Sail University in the Orlando area. And I'll explain for those who've not heard of it what that is in a second. Talk about PGA Tour Live, these 4 streams they're putting on the air almost every week. How different, or is it different from what you've been doing at Golf Channel?
Oh, I'd say it's completely different, but it's not different at all, if that makes any sense. So
okay.
I was, like I said, 19 and a half years of working in the golf industry and doing shows that were much more scripted and much more pre and post game based and instructional. But I was always in the industry and I was watching big events. I was watching the tournaments and working before and after the tournaments and collaborating with those directors and producers. I was always listening to how they were directing things and watching what they were doing. So then when I was able to make the switch to directing tournaments, it was easier for me because I was very familiar with the people that were doing it and creating those relationships and always listening to them and watching what they were doing. So I was learning, when I first started. I was learning throughout my 19 and a half years there of listening to really good directors and producers on the tournament side doing what they do at a very high level. So in early 2021, I reached out and I talk about relationships and how important they are to my students. I talk about how important they are to help you through your career. The Full Sail and the PGA Tour Live both started from relationships that I made, some really good relationships at Golf Channel. And I reached out to David Gross in 2021. He was the first producer on Morning Drive. He was now at PGA Tour doing a lot of PGA Tour Live, starting to do a lot of those events. And I reached out to him and we went back and forth. He put me in touch with Jackie Petty, who I hit it off with right away. She was directing and producing PGA Tour Lives, and they were building a lot of things about that. But I had also seen in 2014, really quickly, I was at the Tour Championship in 2014, and that's when PGA Tour Live was starting to do a lot of their tournaments, and they were in the same compound as Golf Central was. And I remember having a tour of the truck and seeing Emmett Loughran and a lot of people that I admired from Golf Channel doing and directing some of these shows. And I always thought, boy, that would be really cool someday to be able to do that. And, just to help that team and join that team in some capacity. So when 2020 hit, and then I started talking to David and Jackie in 2021, I went up to St. Augustine and I watched in fall of 2021 and I watched the events, and I had never done a tournament before. I had directed hundreds, thousands of shows at Golf Channel in the golf industry, but I had never been asked to cut cameras and to do graphics and audio and make those calls and lead a team on the remote tournament side, but knew I could, and started doing it in the fall of 2021. And then January 2021, when after ESPN had signed a 9-year deal with PGA Tour, I was one of the first lead directors on the first time we were doing 4 streams in January 2021 for the Palm Springs event in the third week of January 2022.
It was 22. Yeah.
22. Yes. 2021 is when I reached out to them. 2022, I was a lead director on the featured group stream 3, featured group stream for the first time we were doing 4 streams going out on ESPN Plus. So that was another first time. And I was really, truly proud of that, just as much as I was of the Golf Channel first times as well.
I was lucky enough to be there that week as well, just randomly, the first week that PGA Tour Live went to 4 streams. And what I remember was Greg Hopfe, who is the lead PGA Tour Entertainment, stood up in front of the entire compound and said, "Look, we have no idea if this is going to work or not."
Yes, I remember that.
You know, and it was but he had a great attitude, and he stressed that we are going to be a place where we're going to work together. Like you were talking about earlier, there are no screamers in our control rooms. And it just makes it a lot of fun to go up there when we're in St. Augustine.
Yes.
And then the teaching position. So for those who don't know, Full Sail University in Winter Park, Florida, right outside of Orlando, started as a recording studio in Ohio that moved to Orlando in the 1980s. They specialize in film and TV production, audio, video game design, animation, media studies, and something called the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. And you teach sportscasting to aspiring students at Full Sail. How did that come about?
So another relationship-based job. I found out I was going to be done at Golf Channel in June 2020, and I needed to figure out my next step. And 2020 was a very trying year for so many people. I was personally going through a lot. I was just starting a divorce, unfortunately, at the time. I was losing a job of 20 years. I was moving. I was doing a lot of things in Orlando here that it was very a trying time in a lot of ways. But so I had to figure out what my next step was going to be professionally on top of all those things. And I reached out to Eric Saperstein right away when I found out. I reached out to people that I admired and mentors of mine and good friends of mine with the PGA Tour, with LPGA, somewhere in the golf industry, somewhere in the broadcast industry. I knew about Full Sail being there, and I had hired some Full Sail students at Golf Channel when I was managing in operations near the end of my time at Golf Channel. So I knew the kind of student that was there. But I didn't know a whole lot about the university, and besides some of the people that I hired or worked with. And Eric Saperstein was the education director for different programs at the school, and we had worked together for about 8 or 9 years at Golf Channel. And I talked to him. He put me in touch with Gus Ramsey. They kind of created a position for me in some ways to come on to their team. And I didn't get a course director position right away. I knew I wanted to teach, but there wasn't a class available at the time. But I trusted them, and I trusted Eric and Gus, both really, really good producers and better off good people. And Gus Ramsey has created such a great team at Full Sail, and I knew I wanted to be a part of it. So I started my first year. I really was in the control room, and I was directing, and I was helping students learn how to direct and produce and do different things in the control room. Once they could come back into the control room because of the pandemic, and also trying to create a lot of different operating procedures with our students in the control rooms, and really trying to up the brand inside that control room. So, and then in 2021, Introduction to Sportscasting show, which is the first class in the program, opened up, and they offered me that position. So now I was a course director in the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting, and it's only been around for 5.5 years. So it's pretty new, but there was 15 course directors in that program, 15 classes, and I got to learn a lot about it for the first year, and then I was ready to teach it. And like I said, the first class in the program, so I teach students that are about 2 months into their time at Full Sail. They take general education classes first, and they get to me. And then what's so much fun about it, Whit, is that I can get to know these students, the campus students. I teach campus and also online students. But the campus students, I can really get to know all of my students really well and see their growth throughout their time at Full Sail. It's a month over month. I get new students every month, both online and on campus. And I just had my first graduating class last month. Now, everyone that graduates in our program will have come through my class. And it's really great to see. And I can help them a lot of ways with references and just really see their growth on air or just professionally and personally. So it's just so rewarding. It's such a rewarding thing that I get to the blessed to have the chance to do right now.
21,000 students combined on campus and online, according to Full Sail's website. The ones that come to your class, what's the typical profile of a student that wants to take essentially sports broadcasting 101?
Not having all the numbers in front of me, I would say probably just going based on feel, I would say 80% of those students are going to be coming straight out of high school. Maybe another 10% or maybe military based, coming to us maybe a little bit more mature and after their time in the military, and they have a dream and they want to go for that dream. And I would say, 5% of our students are from another, maybe got a degree from UCF, or we had some from Alabama or Texas, or a different degree in a different field, but they always wanted to be on TV and they always wanted to be maybe a sideline reporter in the NFL or something. That's their goal. So they have to start with us, and then maybe they come to us for a certificate program, like a 10-month program. There's other kinds of programs. There's a 29-month, there's a 20-month, there's a certificate program, which is kind of like an associate's degree you would get with us. Just based on which one they want to go, that's, it's a lot of students coming to us. And online, I could have upwards of 50 students a month. So it's, I can mentor a lot of different kind of students throughout my, doing this. And that's what it's so exciting to me, of getting to know these students. So yes, there's a lot of students. I saw 30 of them today. It's finals week, so there's probably 25 or 30 in the studio, and they're all working in the studio. They're learning to direct, to produce, to shoot, to edit, to do audio, to do any. So they come out of our school. It's a very hands-on school, and they come out of our school and they're ready to go in the industry. And then I also have the chance with PGA Tour Live. I've offered 3 of my students now. It's their finals week. They have their final tomorrow. I offer them the chance to come up to St. Augustine and be in a truck and meet people and meet professionals and really see how this tournament is put together and watch the directing and the producing and the cameras and all of that. So that's been really neat too, to kind of teach that way of seeing it firsthand. And they're in my class with a long answer here, but they're very wide-eyed and they don't know anything about it. And it's our job to teach them a new language, and that language is television. And so luckily we've worked in it long enough where we can do that.
If someone came to you, and this may be an odd question because you are literally a teacher of this subject matter, but if someone came to you and said, just general advice, what do I need to know about relationships, about not the technical stuff, the personal stuff, what should I focus on if I want to pursue a career in sports media?
Oh, that's a great question. And I try to teach that more than the hard skills of being on camera or the directing or the producing or the camera, your framing and your different backgrounds and how to frame yourself correctly and how to mic yourself. Those are all things we're going to teach them, the hard skills. But I'd much rather teach them, since it's their first class in the program and they come to me probably younger than any other course director is going to get them. I would say that it's never too early to start networking. Treat this program like it's your job. Make sure you network. Make sure you're professional and your brand is one of professionalism. You're working well with others, and the teamwork is those soft skills. My first class each month, I teach them about the hard skills, what we can teach them in this program, how to be on camera, your voice, your pace, how to present yourself. And Dan will also show them videos of Dan teaching them and the importance of interviewing, the hard skills that they're going to learn in our program. But I focus a lot more on the soft skills. Being kind is not a problem. It's a good thing to be respectful and to be kind. And I want them to understand the importance of that. That's how you're going to build your relationships. How to be professional, showing up on time. If you're on time, you're actually late. I deduct points for them if they're going to show up to my class late, and I'm honest with them, and I can give them really honest feedback, because understanding how to take feedback and criticism. I don't like to call it criticism. I like to call it growth opportunity, to be positive about it, to spin it that way. But young in your career, knowing how to take feedback from professionals, it may not be easy to hear, but I know that the feedback I took when I was young, it was really hard for me to hear, and I wasn't ready to hear it. But it was the best feedback that I could have ever gotten, because it helped me grow. So we're honest with them. We talk to them about networking. We talk about relationships. I think is number one in this industry. You know how small this industry is and you can burn yourself pretty quickly with the way that you treat people. So I want them to understand the importance of that for sure.
In just a few seconds, we'll have some closing thoughts on this episode, so stay tuned. If you're enjoying it so far, please consider subscribing or sharing and leave a review. Let me know what you'd like to hear in the future on Media Credentials. You heard Eric mention the name Gus Ramsey. Gus, like me, is an ESPN refugee living in Central Florida. Gus was producing SportsCenter in Bristol during the zenith days of Keith Olbermann and Craig Kilborn and, yes, Dan Patrick, who not only lent his name to the Full Sail School of Sportscasting, but also helped develop the program and brought Gus in to run it. The Dan Patrick School offers a Bachelor of Science degree, and there's also an undergraduate certificate program. If it's not obvious, Eric Rutledge is one of the most thoughtful and kind people I've ever met in this cutthroat business, and that's why I wanted him on the podcast. In sports media, like in many industries, I imagine, there are good people and there are bad people, and Eric is good people, and proof that you don't have to raise your voice to be heard. Thanks again for listening to Media Credentials. For examples of my work, including video and audio clips, a blog, and my contact page, check out whitwatson.com.